does. So Ally runs her own small business called Fallen Cargo. She also does pretty regular freelance work for a few clients, one of them being Stay Silent, which is a media company that's based in Providence, Rhode Island. You have a BFA in studio art, or what is it again? Your
visual communication design. I think is like the technical term. It's weird.
And that was from a school in Connecticut, correct?
Yeah, I went to the Hartford Art School.
Hartford Art School. So it was like a major that kind of included graphic design and other forms of media as well. So cool. So I'm so glad that you're here with us, Ally. Thanks so much for joining us today. And yeah, I'll hand it over to you for the presentation.
Awesome. So I'm Ally. I'm a designer, illustrator. I run a small brand called Fallen Cargo that is dedicated to protecting and preserving Black cultural institutions. And a lot of the work that I'll be showing you is for an organization called Stay Silent, which is an events curation agency that is grounded in hip hop community and throwing events for the hip hop community, which is so often, there's a lot of stigma around hip hop community. People criminalize it because the audience is majority Black, and people have their own ideas of what the Black community is like that can be really harmful. So as I'm talking about some of these events and these projects, I want to sort of break down a design ethos that ties in having like a cultural understanding and so having some understanding of history so that you can understand the value of this type of work. So this is sort of a design ethos that I was putting together, and like all these different steps to creating these types of spaces, especially if you're designing for marginalized groups of people. So one is understanding colonialism and like how it suppresses culture. Understand and value the cultural language of your audience. Break the design of colonialism. Create the spaces that you want to be in. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, and promote radical joy for all beings. And that's definitely something that I've learned through the process of designing events for Stay Silent. So I'll start off with one of their events called Love You Better, which is their R&B night. And which is like one big family reunion sing-along. I hope everybody gets an opportunity that when the world opens back up to go to one, because it's a really awesome, inclusive space to be in. This is just an overview of flyers that I've worked on with Stay Silent. Like their branding is surrounded by just like, it's like, I always like to design flyers for this event that make you salivate. It makes you crave candy. It's very sweet, it's very juicy. That's like my favorite type of design to do. And one of the first activations that I did with Stay Silent was for their Valentine's Day Love You Better. They wanted to do something really special, but also simple, that was like quick on the fly. And we did a like give a carnation activation through Instagram story. And I think it's so important to, again, understand the cultural language of your audience and meet people where they're at. So being able to do like a Valentine that was reminiscent of like getting a Valentine in your homeroom, right? And so we would have, we posted this the day of the party, and then we have people screenshot it and tag their friends, their crushes, and put it in their Instagram story or in their DM. So it was like a really simple activation, again, not reinventing the wheel, but it was something that immediately connected with the community and the audience. And then, so that was a really small one. And then a larger project that I got to work on was Go Outside. I ended up being a model for it too. This is when I had hair. This was, I think, like about a little over a year ago. And so Stay Silent, they wanted to release a merchandise capsule, but also promote a message of going outside and exploring the city of Providence. And this campaign was going to build all the way up to PVD Fest. So for anybody that's in Providence. Like PVD Fest, I feel like essentially kicks off the summer. And so we designed 3 pieces of merch and a digital handbook. So I worked with a team of people, and we were able to come up with these 3 designs for some merchandise. Merch is a really important part of the Stay Silent experience. For example, like the PVD script that you see within the orange with the grass, like that's their signature, one of their signature designs that people love. And so we try to revamp it every year. So one year they did an Easter one. This year we did one that was themed around being outside and very seasonal. And so part of the experience of the merch was like creating this big editorial story piece that would reminisce like just a perfect summer day in Providence. So we did a shoot. We did a shoot at New York Systems. I'll show a little bit of that. We highlighted this icy truck called Signage, which is in the Providence community. And then there's this area called the Shack, which is another place that we highlighted that Stay Silent is in partnership with, which is essentially just like an activation space and a picnic space. So we wanted to tell this story through these editorials and through an Instagram story that would be included in this like digital handbook. And so we tapped into a lot of nostalgia and like 1970s print material, like textbooks. So I created this like handbook that was also the flyer for when we were releasing the merch, which was at PVD Fest. And this handbook would like send you a list of things, like free or cheap things to do in the city of Providence. And so through the Instagram story, we had this like swipe through story of just highlighting Onlyville, New York Systems, the Shack, Pilages, and then that final slide would lead you all the way up to the pop-up at PVD Fest. And at PVD Fest, that's where Stay Silent, they do an event at the main stage where they do a big performance and they have other local acts come and perform, or they do a DJ set. And at that main stage is where they'll be selling the merchandise. And so this is generally what the PVD Fest like main stage. We have like a DJ, we have a couple performers, and then we just have a huge crowd of people that just come and dance. One of the biggest things that they do at PVD Fest is like a citywide electric slide. And the electric slide is like a Black American cultural artifact. It's like a ritual that we perform at every Stay Silent event and at other events surrounded by like hip hop, that is centered in hip hop music. And so that whole like ecosystem of showing you how we're able to like create merch, tell a story through digital content, and then also provide you with an in real life experience. And that's generally the ecosystem that, the marketing ecosystem that Stay Silent likes to work in. And then next, we're gonna get to like our biggest event, which is Decals. Decals is probably the biggest hip hop festival in Providence. And they're one of the first to kind of do it. What's great about Decals is in the community, they treat it like a holiday. There's always a countdown to it. It's an event that sells out within an hour. I believe in 2019, they sold out of 2 dates within an hour. And so there's 2 Decals events every summer. So there's one in June to kick off summer, and then there's one in August to close out summer. My role on this project was to be the lead designer. So I developed the design direction within the Decals branding. And so these were the 2 poster designs that I illustrated and developed. And every year it's about like growing the audience bigger and bigger. So I think they've gone from having 40 people at this event to 3,000 people at this event since, I don't know, for like 7 summers. And so that's how they've been able to grow Decals and create a culture around it. At the last one, what was really significant about the last one is they had it at India Point Park. And if anybody knows the history of India Point Park, it used to be a port for slave ships. And so to be able to create a hip hop event with a predominantly a crowd that's predominantly Black and of color, and it's a place for radical joy. It's incredibly significant culturally to be able to create a place of enjoyment in a space that is part of our oppression. And so that was really significant about the last day trail that we had. And within the flyer, it was super important to tap into like things that are significant to the Stay Silent audience, from the script PVD hat to, we have a designer on the Stay Silent team named Drew White, and he designed these New Balances for Bodega, which have become pretty like famous. It was on a list for like the top sneaker designs in 2019. And we call him Drew Balance now. And so it was important to add that into the design, as well as the backdrop of the Providence city. And so with Daytrill, it's like not only creating these digital graphics, but we also wanted to tap into just traditional marketing. And so we decided to flex a big billboard. And what was cool about that is we were able to do like a meetup and get a bunch of people who are part of like the Stay Silent ecosystem and the Stay Silent family, and just do one big family photo. And I think family and community is a huge part of the Stay Silent design ecosystem. And we were able, anybody that drove by it would also like take a video of it or take a picture of it and put it on Instagram and tag Stay Silent. So it was another thing to build up the event, and another thing to count down the event and get people excited for this event. Another simple activation that we did was we did our like very basic pull tab poster, which is like, it's like, I think sometimes in design we love to over design things, but again, like low hanging fruit, you kind of just got to meet your audience where you're at. And at this stage, when I put this together, like Daytrill was sold out. And so Stay Silent wanted to take an opportunity to give free tickets away. So we did a pull tab poster in a secret location, and we took a photograph of it with context clues. And so people would have to go on the scavenger hunt to find this poster and get the tab, and then text spread love to 33222 so that they can get a free ticket. So it was another very like small, simple interaction. And then at the event, another part of my role was creating directional signage and decals. And so we wanted to create these small interactions that were like Easter eggs. So like I designed these ground decals that would engage people in togetherness and safety, and still make it fun and still put it in the language of the audience. We didn't get to use all of them. Sometimes when you're designing with events, like some ideas get greenlit and some ideas don't, depending on the weather. And just before we launched this event, it started to rain. And so the entire park, this was at Kennedy Plaza in an ice skating rink, what is it called? Alex and Ani Center. And so the ground was still wet, so we couldn't put all the decals in, but we were able to get this one in where it says like, we know you love Henny, but stay hydrated. And Hennessy is like another cultural artifact within hip hop culture. And so to keep it fun, but also ensure safety, because it got really warm that day. It's really hot. We don't want people passing out, or everyone's dancing and having a good time. So there's always free water. And I thought it was like a great little like small detail or small touch to keep people engaged in the space. Another small interaction that we have are like color changing cups. Part of the merchant, we have like a merchandise package, and part of that is adding towels. Surprisingly, people really love towels. I feel like they almost love the towel more than they love like t-shirts, because it's like everybody's hot, they're sweating, they're dancing, having a good time, and the towel just seems to be like a great takeaway. So you'd be surprised at like the simple things that people love and people enjoy when designing for events. And then probably the biggest activation that I worked on for Decals was an art wall. Um, one really important part to the storytelling of Stay Silent and Decals is photographs. People love getting their picture taken at these events. I've worked at Decals not only just on the design side, but also doing my own photography work. So we generally have about like 5 or 6 photographers on site and a videographer. And every photographer like provides their own style and own perspective to the event. But I designed this art wall, which is great for one of the photographers who specializes in more so like set photography. He's like a studio photographer. He's not really a nightlife photographer. And so I designed this art wall, or I made this illustration for this art wall. And here's some like process shots of our design team putting it together. It was actually like really meditative and a really good time to like, because there's so much stuff that goes into putting this event together. And so finally to have like family design team time just to like meditatively paint a mural. And then this is the mural at the event. Are you guys seeing like the little Zoom box on my screen?
What do you mean by Zoom box?
You know how it's like the screens of like all the faces? I don't know. It's showing up on mine, and I wasn't sure if it was showing up on everybody else's, but it's just the presentation, correct?
I just see the 2 images side by side.
Perfect. So this was just an image of the mural in the space. And people just, again, people love the camera. People love showing their outfits. People love the promenade of Decals. That's a huge part of the culture of this event. So it was a nice addition to the activation space. There's some more photographs. And what's really cool is I made sure that I set up the mural so that like if one person is in the center of the image, it'll still spell out LOVE. So that was really cool. And just, again, small details, paying attention to how people are going to engage or interact with the space. And that's that.
Thank you. Oh, thanks for your contact information too.
Yes.
So I want to start off with a few questions that I have, and then we can hand it over to the class to ask other questions. So a lot of the things you showed today are like kind of things that are out in the physical world that are causing like interaction and things like that. Whereas for this assignment, most likely students are going to be like telling a story through digital content or like a website or something like that. So do you have advice for like maybe how you like translate some of these like archive pieces that you're taking? Like how do you translate that to a website, or like how do you tell an effective story on a website?
How do we do that? I'm trying to think, because it all depends on like the story that you want to tell. And I think in terms of events and like immersing people in an experience, like being able to show like photographs of people, because I'm thinking of like within the hip hop space, like I have a lot of friends that like to shoot within crowds of people, and being able to show imagery of that, of like crowds of people, I guess like spatial photography. One of the things that Stay Silent always does is like they love being able to just highlight a moment at the event. Like one event at Decals that I think was highlighted through video content was we usually rent these new house inflatable sculptures, right? And I think someone ended up memeing it. And unfortunately, like memes are a way of like taking what's in real life and like putting it in a digital space and giving people content of like we have the saying, you wasn't there. And again, it's to like promote that idea of FOMO where it's like you missed out on a really good time. And so with events, it's like sometimes you have to tap into that element of FOMO and just be like, oh man, you missed out on this, you missed this, or you wasn't there. That's always like a common phrase that we have when we are sharing these experiences on the internet. And I think always, it's always nice to have your audience also share content of themselves at these events. And so being able to get like consumer experiences and have them share it and be able to collect all of those, and everybody has their own visual of it, because so many people are on things like Instagram, right? So many people are paying attention to unproduced content, and for some reason that has a connection with the audience. So that's another way of it almost has like a DIY element to it. That's another way of being able to share in real life content on a digital platform, of like being able to build up the hype around it, which is like a double-edged sword, but it is very effective. I hope that answers your question. That's like one way I can think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I like this idea of like, you know, using photography in unexpected ways. Like I think for definitely like because I'm trying to think of like ways to make a WordPress site more dynamic. And I think always, yeah, that featured image or that first thing that you see, if it's like, whether or not it's like an image carousel or like a few seconds of a looping video, but you know, those things, like I do agree with you that like those, like try to figure out like a moment that you can highlight, or maybe a thing that's like kind of unexpected that like sets a tone. I do think that that can be really effective. The next question I have is, makes me think specifically of one person that's on the call, Ashleana, but it seems like you kind of bridge a lot of different worlds, but like one that you seem to really bridge is like illustration and design. So whether you speak to like that specific bridge of those two worlds, or, you know, I know other people on this call, like, you know, Lynn, for example, is like a printmaker and a graphic designer. Like, do you have suggestions for people that are kind of going out there as like a multi-pronged being, and like kind of how to play up those strengths or like use that to your advantage as you're kind of growing early in your career?
Yeah, I feel like it's just like, I go with my gut with a lot of things. And I think I really enjoy illustration as its own thing, but I've always worked to try to figure out how to incorporate it in the design work in a way that makes sense. Because like, and two, like one thing that I've learned through illustration is there's a such thing as brand illustration, which is super popular. And so I think a lot of it also depends on the client. Like before I started incorporating illustration into my design work, I was just doing illustration for myself. And then I'd have clients be like, yo, I really like this illustration style. Can you do that for me? And so I think there's nothing wrong if your illustration work is separate, or if your printmaking work is separate from the design stuff that you do, there is a way to bridge the gap. And sometimes your client or an audience can inform how to do that. I know one way that I've tried to bridge that gap is by incorporating it in a project for my brand, Fallen Cargo. Like I have this series within my brand called Do Rags to Riches, and it's all dedicated to illustration work. And I think just working through that, through trial and error, and you start to find where those two things fit in and they work well together. So you just got to try it and not be afraid if it doesn't fit or it doesn't work out. Like there's always room to finesse it and find that sweet spot of where your illustration work or your fine arts work can really mesh well with your design work.
Mm-hmm. And then The last question, who knows, maybe I'll ask more questions as we go throughout. But one other thought I had, it was just about like how you find some of your clients, because it does seem like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did a thing for the Celtics, right?
Yes, I did.
So just, yeah, like maybe either speak to that project or just like ways that you've been able to kind of find clients that allow you to kind of like go outside your comfort zone and work in different ways.
Of course. So a lot of it is just through who you know. And I know that can feel overwhelming to like a student when somebody says, "Oh, it's all about who you know," but it's like that's really true. It almost seems like a cliche to say that, but it's very true. It's all about who you know. And so you have to be really diligent in putting yourself out there and making connections with people and being able to create those opportunities and advocate for yourself. Um, like one way that I've done that is just by showing up to people's events and like talking to people and like figuring out what people do. And so definitely in order to get into that who you know space, you have to do the work to put yourself out there and build real genuine connections with people. And then another way that I've gained clients is through staffing agencies. Like I've worked with Creative Circle right out of college. And that's how I was able to get opportunity at Hasbro and like get my foot in the door there. And the thing with Hasbro is like there's so many talented people there that also have their own things outside of their work at Hasbro. So that's how I've been able to build connections on top of getting involved with AIGA's Rhode Island chapter as well, which isn't really functioning right now, but there's also AIGA Boston. And so I really urge you to, don't be afraid to look into staffing agencies. I think the staffing agencies are great for when you just graduated college, just to get your foot in the door, because a lot of times you're going to be frustrated with applying for jobs where it asks you for 3 to 5 years experience. And it's just like, how am I supposed to get 3 to 5 years experience if I'm just starting out? It can be really discouraging. So I think staffing agencies can be a really great first step into like figuring out, they help you figure out your value. They help you understand your rate. They help you understand like what opportunities are out there for you. So utilize that resource for sure.
You can also stop share if you want so that your
that'd be great.
Is bigger.
So the staffing agency you mentioned was AIGA. Is that the one you were just mainly talking about?
Creative Circle.
Oh, Creative Circle. Okay, that was one I actually just heard about recently too. Like yeah, where it kind of connects you to like different agencies. And is it like contract work kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a lot of like contract temp work. Like I've been doing temp contracts at Hasbro for 3 years. Hasbro also has like a vendor system where it's like, which is like if you're an established like freelance designer or you have your own independent practice, you apply to be in their vendor system and you determine your own rate and they could get you work at any point in time. Whereas when you go through a staffing agency, your contract has a limit on it. So anytime I've contracted at Hasbro, it's either like a 6 months to a year contract. But once that year contract is up, I can't reapply for a position for 6 months. And so, but when you're in your vendor system, there's no like 6 month grace period or anything like that. You can always get a contract whenever you want. So those are like the differences. I would say like the pros and cons to it is like when you get into a vendor system, the demand is much higher than when you're on like a temp contract.
Why is that?
I'm trying to figure out why, because with vendor systems, like there's a lot of like small in-house design agencies that work within the vendor system. And when you're in there as like an individual designer, but your establishment is like a design agency, they just assume, I don't know, it's just like, I always find that there's a lot more demand because you can ask for a higher rate. when you're in a vendor system.
Hmm.
So like when you're temping, your temp agency is the one that negotiates the rate for you. They're the middleman. Whereas like the vendor system, there is no middleman. You are the person determining what your rate is and what you're asking for.
I would say though, also for those of you that are graduating soon, you know, reach out to a place like Creative Circle like soon, because like the headhunter or whoever is like your contact person can start to tell you now like what kinds of things to put in your portfolio and like how your resume should be formatted, right? Like that kind of.
Yeah, they do a really great job at just sort of like guiding you and just like understanding what the job market is like. And also they know a lot about certain companies and what they ask for, because they've always placed, there's certain companies that they always place people at. So like they can tell you what the climate is like at Hasbro, or they can tell you what the climate is like at another company.
Yeah.
And they're really nice people. They're just there to help, you know.
Because I remember when I graduated, I think it was even Creative Circle that I used. And I remember like meeting with someone and like showing them my portfolio, and they were making suggestions on like what to edit out, what to include. Because at the end of the day, like you said, they know the world so well, because that's what they do for a living, is place people at these companies. And also the other thing that's incredibly helpful is just that they want to get you in a job, because that's how they get paid.
Yep. Essentially. Yeah. But the thing is like I haven't worked with Creative Circle in a while, but I think because now it's like I have my own context and I've been able to like work my way through that. But for like anybody that's at the junior level, like I highly recommend, because they can just at least give you a starting point, because that's what everybody needs, is like just that foot in the door. Even if it's a bad experience, at least you'll know what you don't like.
Yeah. Oh, and then also to get back to a thing you said, Reed, about AIGA. AIGA is like a graphic design guild. So it's basically like, as a student, you can get cheaper membership to it. As a professional, it's a little bit more, but I want to say something like, I don't know, $60 a year or something like that. And what you get with that membership is like access to job search postings, an opportunity to go to like different conferences that are held, different roundtable discussions, different like, so it's like, it's really about like networking and like growing your. Do you want to talk, Ally, a little bit about your assessment with AIGA?
So AIGA.org, you can go on there and also get an idea of rates. They have this like rate calculator or salary calculator. So you just type in what your position is, whether it's junior, mid-level, senior level. And I think also like the area you live in, and they can give you an estimate of what salary you should be asking for, or it gives you like an estimate idea. But I worked with the Rhode Island chapter and I had an awesome time, and I got to like just creative direct and design a bunch of really awesome content. And it was my first time getting into events and designing for events and event planning. I learned that I don't like event planning because you have to be a type A person, and two, like you have to be on a team of type A people to really like get events going. But for the most part, like we had a really great team of people. But when you're volunteers and you're trying to throw events every month, it is very hard and very challenging. But I think with the Rhode Island chapter, what made it different than other chapters is because it was part of a small community. And so it's very easy to morph it into whatever you want. And I think there's a great opportunity right now to take it over and do something really cool and different with it. Whereas Boston, I feel like, is already established. They have their team of people. It's a bigger community. And there's like, when there's a bigger community, there's more bureaucracy in it. Same thing with New York. Like I know designers who they don't like going to New York AIGA events because they're so big, and there's a lot of like experienced people, and it can be really challenging if you're just like a junior designer trying to find your space. But the Rhode Island chapter I found was really awesome to work with. So yeah, we got to do some cool stuff. But I think AIGA, like the Boston chapter is still really awesome. The last time I was connected with them, a guy named Nick was the president, but I don't think he's the president anymore. It changes I think every 2 years there's a new president. So I highly just recommend just like getting to know the different chapters within New England, not even just like you can look at the Boston one, you can look at the Connecticut one, you can figure out the Rhode Island one as well. Just see what's out there.
The first time we met in person, right? Was at
for the Know Her Summit.
Yeah. And then one other thing I wanted to say too is, you know, I feel like a lot of your presentation was about stay silent, but like I know you also obviously run your own brand, which I think is of interest to a lot of students in this class too, of kind of setting up their own brand and opening up shop and things like that. Like, do you have advice for people that are kind of at the very beginning stages of doing those things?
Oh, of course. I think with starting your own brand, I feel like I've made so many false starts with it, and that's okay. I feel like it's always good to start small and to create something that like you and like your 5 friends would enjoy. Create something that like you want to put out there in the world. For me, with Fallen Cargo, like I figured out like why do I want to engage in design? What is something with design that is like meaningful to me? And like what made me want to do it was the fact that I didn't see a lot of people who look like me in this space. Like I never got to work with Black creatives until I worked with Stay Silent, and I was already like 4 years within the design industry before I met like other Black designers. And so I created it out of necessity, for sure. But yeah, with starting your own brand, just start small. Start with something that is like meaningful to you, that you feel like you could design with, and like something that has legs and that could evolve. I think it's super important to not get intimidated by business. I don't look at business and creative as separate things. They work in unison. So it's like if you have a message that's meaningful to you and you have work that you feel passionate about, like you need the business to help that message, to help you sustain that message. And one of the biggest things that I felt was really important with starting my own brand is creating a business account solely for your creative endeavors. Even if you don't create a business or a brand, I highly recommend anybody that decides to like create their own personal work, create a separate account for it, like a separate banking account for it. That has been super helpful for me in understanding the value of my work and understanding like how much am I spending to create this art? How much am I investing to create this art? And you'll find that once you tap into the business side of it, you know a lot more than you think you do. Like I would have never, probably like in the last 4 years, I would have never thought of myself as like a business person, like, and thinking about strategy in that way. And I feel like once I got waist deep in it, it was like, oh, this makes sense. This sounds easy. And it's so integral to the design work. So don't be afraid of business. Start small and create the thing that you just want to see out there in the world.
Nice. All right. What about other people? Do you have questions for Ally? Also, secret information about Ally. Ally also knows how to code.
I'm part of the code club. I've been away for a while, but I'm preoccupied with something, but I'm coming back to it. I'm gonna come back to it.
Ally has been a longtime member of Code Club and also made some really cool interactive graphics and things. So.
And it's a good time. It's good. That was like when we were in quarantine, and I was just like I hadn't seen humans in a while, and that like got me through a lot of dark quarantine moments. So I appreciate Code Club.
Nice. All right. Any other questions for Ally about any of the things she talked about today? Or yeah, Chidima?
So how important would you say internships are?
I'll be honest, I've never had an internship. Like I had like telecommunication internships. I think it all depends on the university you go to. Like, is it a requirement at UMass Dartmouth in like the design program?
No.
No, I don't think so.
It like wasn't really a requirement for me, but I don't know. Like I wasn't like I had a couple friends that had internships. Some of them were their internships turned into jobs. I don't know. I'm like a hit or miss with internships because I don't believe that I believe in paid internships. Like I believe y'all should be getting paid. But I don't know. Like I haven't had enough experience with internships to determine whether it's necessary or not. But I do know people who've had internships and who've benefited from it, you know. I wish I could give you a better answer, but I hope you don't feel the pressure to get an internship. Like, do you feel any pressure to have an internship on your belt by now?
I mean, not exactly. I just thought it was like really important and helpful for a designer.
Yeah. I think it is super important to understand how the work environment works, like how the corporate design space works, how the agency space works, because there's so many things that university cannot teach you. Like you're a student even after you graduate college. Like there's so many things that I've learned about design and strategy from just working in spaces, but also like I know that there are some design programs where their graphic design program is 5 years. Like at Hasbro, they have a lot of people from Cincinnati, which has a very like Cincinnati and Michigan, I believe, which they have a pretty like rigorous graphic design program and structural engineering program. And so there's a lot of co-ops that come in and out of the Hasbro space, and they get some really fantastic experience. They get to work on some like real stuff that ends up existing in the world. So that's the only experience that I can give. That's like more of a secondhand experience of co-ops and internships. So any opportunity to like get in to see what the work environment is like before getting into the working field, I think is always good. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. I totally get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Ally?
What year is everyone at? Like, is it different levels, junior, senior?
Yep, I'm in my last semester as a senior. I like pretty much like a super senior. Had to come back for an extra semester.
Yeah. How do you feel about it? Like, are you like, do you put a lot of pressure on yourself, or are you just like you're in the space that you need to be in and you're ready to like move on, like where you're at?
Yeah, well, I mean, this semester's been kind of like surprisingly good for me because this class especially, there's been like a lot of things that like weren't covered, like kind of crucial things that weren't covered. Either I just didn't take, the right classes or whatever happened, but like we're working on now going into like a web design or like an interactive design. And we work with some video too. So like those were two kind of new things and obviously like crucial things. So it's kind of lucky for me for this semester that,
Yeah, and those are awesome things that you're going to use in the graphic design world. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think like the biggest thing for like juniors and seniors is to like alleviate the pressure off yourself and don't get caught up in just like getting the assignment done for the grade. Like actually create real work that you want to exist. That's what I started doing. I think by the end of my junior year, I was just like, I don't want to keep making assignments or like student work. Because a lot of times when you're in the art school space, you're kind of creating in a vacuum. You're working around the same creatives everybody's getting the same assignment, and sometimes you're getting the same content, and you have to like design that content in all these different ways. And so like get to a space where it's just like you're creating real work. And once you do that, I think it's easier to get into to like develop your portfolio and like figure out what it is that you want to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's been another good thing about this class too, because like the projects we're working on are things that are good for, they kind of lend themselves easily to being, good portfolio pieces. And there's been a few classes that we've had there that, some obviously you'd have to kind of go over, go kind of exceed to make a good portfolio piece. But this class is really been good for
Awesome.
that. So
Thanks. Yeah. That's something I definitely had in my mind when I was like curating kind of what we were going to do, is like I was asking myself like what a junior level designer needs that like hasn't been covered already in other classes. So I appreciate that came across.
yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
One last thing I have, because I know Tyler's on the call, but sometimes he is in like a situation where he can't unmute, but it does seem like music is so important to you. And I know that tends to be a thing that comes up so much of like this like love of visual design and how to like bring that into the music industry, whether it be like show posters, album covers, graphics for shows, kind of like a lot of the work you showed was like posters for music events. Like, do you have advice for people that are trying to kind of break into that world of kind of where to get started? Or
I feel like, so I started freelancing like while I was in school, and one of my first clients was Joyner Lucas. He's a rapper from
I
Worcester,
love
and
Joyner.
he's like, you're a fan?
Yeah, he's from Worcester. I know exactly who he is.
Yeah, he's one of my first clients that I worked with out of college, and that was like a really interesting experience because musicians are very particular and can be
Yeah,
really
like
hard to
very.
design. They're very hard to design for, and
Yeah.
Joyner Lucas is like a visual like creative. He's the creative, like he creates his own content, he directs his own videos, and so he was very hard to work with because he was so particular. I also think if you're going to work in the music industry, like some of the red flags are like if you're working with an artist who is in a disagreement with their management, a lot of times designers get caught in the middle of it, and it
Yeah.
makes your job very difficult. So
Yeah.
that's
I
one red flag.
just had
Like
a situation like that.
I avoid doing that type of work. But if it's
Mm-hmm.
somebody that like I know I know that something good will come out of it, I'll do it. Like I love being able to do it for events because it's not for a specific artist, it's for a community of people. And it's a lot of fun. But somebody that I know a couple people that work heavily in music. There's a designer by the name of Den 12K, and there's another designer, Elijah. I can't think of his last name, but there's they work for Joe Perez Creative Direction, who's based in Pawtucket right now.
Yeah, I
And
know
so
exactly who he is.
yeah. So like his studio is local, and he's somebody that you could hit up at any time and just like seek some type of apprenticeship or
Mhm.
freelance work or whatever. Like he's a resource that's available here, and you can get like some really great client work out of him, but the hours can be ridiculous. Like you'll get paid well, but from what I've like had the experience of working with him for a few days, and then I also have friends who have experience working with him, and sometimes it's like the agency life can be a lot of hours because it's a smaller team of people. The turnarounds are very fast, and sometimes record companies like they have these like very little budgets and very little time, and they want the most out of that tiny budget and that small timeline. So it's not always, for me personally, doing like album packaging and album artwork is not my favorite thing,
Mhm.
but I do love creating for events. Like that's a really fun experience.
Yeah, it's really funny you say that too, because like, I just kind of had a similar experience with like the whole Joyner situation with Do you know who Michael Christmas is?
Yes, I know them. I know
Yeah,
the whole like Van Buren crew.
yeah. So I just worked with him and like on a cover art for his latest song Nissan Ultima, and like it was funny because he was also in like a disagreement with his management about certain things and the direction and stuff. So, and I ended up getting caught in the middle of it. So it's wicked funny that you say that.
Yeah, that happens a lot, and I feel like you gotta do your best to like read the room and figure it out. And then also too, like if situations happen like that, don't be afraid to back out. Like I've done that before where I'm just like, hey, unfortunately, I can't provide you with what you need, so I'm just going to back out. And sometimes giving that rate back, giving their payment back pays you more than losing out on a job, because the time and the labor that you put in is not always worth it. But that's kind of the experience with freelancing. You go through a lot of experiences like that where you start working with people who can be a little janky, or you feel like your time and your labor is being wasted. Like you have the option to be like, no, I'm all set, you know?
Yeah, I really appreciate that advice. It's very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. All right. Any last questions before Ally hops off the call? You said it was going to be an hour, and it's like exactly 1 hour.
I was like trying to time it well. I didn't want my presentation to be too long. I was rehearsing and timing it.
We are so on point with time. It's wild.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ally. I so appreciate, I don't know if you want to share screen maybe one last time, just so that people can get your Instagram or contact if they haven't.
Yeah.
I also added you today to our Slack channel for our interaction assignment. So if you, obviously it's not, you don't have to, but if you so choose, you can check out that channel, because that's where we're going to be like posting up things in development and things that we're working on. So
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you as well. Thank you so much for all of the words that you've said to students. I feel like you've brought up